Floor to Mr. Deutch for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's remarkable to me that the two most important issues to the majority have now collided into one hearing, that a Planned Parenthood hearing has now become a hearing on Benghazi. Yesterday, the House created a select committee to investigate abortion practices, meaning that today's hearing is even more pointless than it was before. The House Judiciary Committee is now one of 4 committees here in the House investigating Planned Parenthood. What exactly are we investigating today? Let's be clear. No one said this yet, but we just need to be clear about it. The goal of the majority is to return to a nation where Roe v. Wade is not the law of the land and where women do not enjoy the constitutional right that the Supreme Court made clear they have to make decisions about their own body. That's what this is about. Now, I don't know why we're here. We're not here to talk about the fruitless investigations undertaken by at least 6 different states, including my own, that have failed to find any illegal wrongdoing by Planned Parenthood. We're not here to discuss the merits of fetal tissue donation, given that the New England Journal of Medicine recently wrote that virtually every person in this country has benefited from research using fetal tissue. And we're not here to discuss a federal court order issued this week mandating that the Center for Medical Progress turn over more of its misleading and fraudulent documentation. This hearing's only purpose is to smear a health care provider that serves millions of women every year, a provider that, I might add, a higher approval rating among the American people than I would guess any member in this body enjoys. Now, as this committee contemplates the medical ethics of women's reproductive freedoms, I ask this question. What are the medical ethics of not holding any hearings on a gun violence epidemic that claims the lives of 30,000 Americans every year? What are the medical ethics of not holding a hearing on the 12,000 homicides and accidental gun deaths and the 18,000 gun deaths by suicide that occur every year? And what are the medical ethics of states trying to ban pediatricians from discussing basic gun safety measures with parents? This House Judiciary Committee has held 0 hearings on a gun violence epidemic that claims American lives every day. Every day, an average of 88 Americans die of gunshot wounds. Nor has this committee held hearings on the deadly mass shootings that have inflicted so much grief in communities across America. Not after Tucson, not after Aurora, not after Newtown, not after Santa Barbara, and there have been none scheduled after Roseburg. And not after any of the more than 200 mass shootings that have already occurred in 2015 alone. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. In 2013 alone, more than 1,600 women were murdered by men, and 94% of them were gun deaths. So, while this committee continues its redundant attacks over women's health, it ignores the reality that every day American women are murdered due to domestic gun violence. Yet, as Congress works to ensure that women face even more humiliating obstacles to safe and legal abortion access, the U.S. Congress stands idly by as violent offenders are still able to skirt background checks and get guns to commit horrific crimes. The American people are rightly frustrated with Congress for failing to take any action, even the most basic action of closing the gun control loophole in the aftermath of so much devastation. There are dozens of bills that deserve hearings in this committee of their jurisdiction. This one, the Judiciary Committee. I don't have the time to name them all, but I'll name a few. There's a bipartisan Public Safety and Second Amendment Protection Act introduced by Congressman Thompson and King that would close gun sale loopholes with comprehensive background checks for all purchases. There's Congressman Quigley's Trace Act that would empower law enforcement to stop the flow of guns to our streets by traffickers who make a living selling guns to criminals. There's Congresswoman Maloney's legislation to lift the ban on federal research on gun violence and how to best curb it. There's my own legislation, the Safe and Responsible Firearms Transfers Act to prevent guns from being sold without background checks. Not one of those bills, not one, has been the subject of a hearing from this committee, Mr. Chairman. Not even a hearing where the majority can bring in witnesses to tell us why bipartisan proposals supported overwhelmingly by the American people and gun owners are somehow too extreme. There's not been a single hearing in the 114th Congress on any common sense improvements to our gun laws. The American people are already frustrated with Congress for failing to act on gun violence. The time for silence on this issue is over. You know, at the beginning of the hearing today, one of my colleagues talked about the self-imposed blindness. Self-imposed blindness. That's the self-imposed blindness that Congress has to gun violence. He said that the humanity of the victims, he hopes, becomes so glaring that it moves an entire generation of the American people. I can only hope that the humanity of the victims of the thousands, tens of thousands of lives lost to gun violence might move this Congress to finally take action. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Labrador, for 5 minutes. And would the gentleman yield to me briefly?
Yes, I will.
I'd like to say that there are now on the books hundreds of federal gun control laws and regulations. And yet, in the last 6 years, the enforcement, the prosecutions for violations of all those laws are down by 30%. And it seems to me that an administration that's led by an individual who calls for more laws every time we have one of these tragedies ought to go look in the mirror and determine what's appropriate to do. I will not yield. It's the gentleman from Idaho.
Perhaps we can have a hearing on that.
It is a problem that can